Welcome back to another episode of the Unrivaled and Rising podcast. I am your host, Michelle Kavanaugh, with my co host and wonderful lady that is a dear friend of mine, Terry. Hey, Terry.
Hey, hi, Michelle. How are you?
I am doing awesome. It's the Sunday before Thanksgiving. That's
I
when we're recording
know.
this. And Kimberly's husband's birthday is today. So they're having a
Yes.
party. So she can't attend. But that's okay because Terry and I really wanted to talk about something that we both have experienced. And so what you can look forward to on this episode is a real honest conversation about, domestic violence, being in a domestic violence relationship, what that looks like, how it feels, and why you stay, and things like that. So, we're going to have a really honest conversation about that today. And we hope you stick around. Please like, share, and subscribe to someone that might need to hear this or would help them. We would greatly appreciate that. I just want to preface this conversation by saying we are not therapists. We are not, we're not psychologists. We're not trying to give advice on how anything should be dealt with. We're just basically talking about our own experience and what we have experienced in these relationships, and hopefully by listening to that story of each of us that you can, it could relate to you or maybe not, and that's okay too. But just wanted to preface this conversation with that.
Yeah.
So
For
I
sure.
think
It's important.
it is. And I think, Terry, you and I talked about this offline before we started this episode, just to really talk about it. And I don't know if there's something you want to say to kind of start off, or how would you like to do it?
Well, I would want to just say, because we talk all things trauma here, and we really stress that it's not events that have happened to us, but it's what happened inside of us in from what happened to us, right? So
Yeah.
something happens, and it's really what took place within our body that has stayed with us. And so I just want to tell everybody that this might be a conversation that might bring some things up. And Michelle, you already hit the disclaimer on, make sure that you're tied into some type of mental health professional, if you're not already. But it might spark something, and you might say, I might need to seek one out for some support. But the one thing that I want to say is just to kind of allow yourself to just be here in the moment and listen to maybe what your body's trying to say. Or if you don't even know, well, how do I know it's trying to say anything? I would just say, listen to those things in your body. So if your heart rate starts to go up or thoughts start to pop in your mind, to just welcome them in and not judge them. And just kind of be the observer of your thoughts and the feelings of what you're feeling, and maybe even journal something and write something down. And when she said this came up. And maybe this will help you be able to also be a little vulnerable and maybe get some support for yourself going forward.
And there's also no shame, you guys. There's
No.
no shame in this conversation. I think a lot of times we re-victimize victims. So I don't know if victim is, some people don't like being called victim, and I get that. But just for the purpose of this conversation, I'm using that word.
Re-traumatization.
Yeah. We
Re-traumatization.
tend to do that. And I want you to understand that there is no shame in this. Nobody's looking down on you or thinking less of you in this world that we live in because this may have happened to you or you're in a current relationship like this. The whole purpose of this is to try to relate to each other,
right?
So that we can support each other. That's the whole point here. It is not to judge or, sit on make us.
And that you're not alone, for one thing, because there's a lot of us that go with it. And there's a lot of us who have dealt with it and and had these silent cries for a long time and didn't know where to reach out. And we'll get into that. And Michelle, you said something, not shaming anyone, but I also want to say we're also here so that we're talking about this, but if something comes up, we're also not giving the permission to blame.
Yeah.
And when I say blame, I say blame yourself for things that you may have been in longer than you should have been. Sometimes we have to thank our body for keeping us safe in moments that we were in survival, but our body actually helped us survive very scary experiences. And so there is no blame. This is just all awareness. And there's, I told the women this morning at the prison, I would never encourage people to go through trauma to learn. But when we can look at the greater you know, 360-degree view of things,
Yeah.
trauma can be a really good teacher if
Yeah.
we allow it to be. And
If
so
we allow it to be, that's the key.
I would never want that, I would never tell you to go through trauma to learn something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if it's been there, we can allow it to teach us if we're willing.
Yes. And I think, and maybe this will be a common theme between the two of us, Terry, but I always thought that I was this really strong, woman that would never find herself in a relationship like this. I
Mm-hmm.
thought, I'm not putting up with that crap. I'm not doing all, I never ever thought that I would be in a situation like this.
Yeah.
And then you find yourself in a situation like this and realize, now that I look back on it, when I'm on the other
Yeah.
side of it several years later, I can see myself being manipulated and treated a certain way, mostly by men. And I'm not cutting men down here. I'm just talking about my experience,
Yeah.
because I was trying to seek out people and looking for people that were in that kind of headspace. So I take responsibility for what I chose at the time. So I'm not blaming men for it. I'm just saying that I see a pattern of behavior.
Mhm.
So
And
now I get it.
that's the awareness part, right?
Yeah.
And you said not shaming men, but I'll tell you what, there's a lot of men in domestic violence relationships with
Big
women.
time.
And so it works both ways. It's men and women.
And they probably talk about it less because they're
do.
ashamed of it. They're probably really ashamed of that.
Yeah.
Because they're supposed to be men, who doesn't take stuff like that. So there's probably a hell of a lot of shame in that game, and I get it. But I don't know. How do you feel about that? Would you ever have thought that you would do that?
And never I would have. And you know what? It kind of creeps up on you, and then you look back and realize what you're in, and then you don't know how to get out.
Yeah.
And so I've once I have experienced this for myself personally through my own journey.
Yeah.
But I also have seen it with other people where people make comments and say, well, why don't they just get out?
Yeah.
And people don't understand how difficult it is. One, it's a pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we feel like we deserve this.
Yeah.
In a way. And that's crazy to say that, but it's what we're actually thinking, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I even had friends who didn't talk to me after a while because I kept going back to a relationship. And this was early in my teenage years.
Yeah.
That this relationship happened, and it went on for all of my teenage years up until I was it was like 13 years, almost my early 20s.
Yeah.
Before I had the courage to, and I actually didn't even have the courage. It was actually, I actually met my now ex-husband. But that's kind of what pulled me out, because I realized I didn't want to return to it, but I had a reason not to, if that makes sense. So I don't know how, had I have not gotten into that relationship, how would I have left?
Yeah. And I went through, mine was much later, not till my 30s, but I, again, still see a serious pattern of behavior prior to that. Like I was dating a lot of different guys in my teenage years and my 20s. And just to have full disclosure here, because of the trauma that I experienced as a child and how little I felt valued as a person, I chose to go towards a relationship very, very young. Mm-hmm. And I started dating when I was 13 and 14 years old, and, became, sexual at that time and all of those things.
Yeah.
And so I started really young.
Yeah.
But went through a lot of relationships. I kind of went, I was in love, but you know how young love is. So it's like, if you last 5 months, you're doing good. You know what I mean? So it's like, I went through a lot of relationships, and a lot of, I was cheated on a ton when I was in high school, because I think I was just really naive and shy. And I think that the guys that I was choosing at that time were just cheating on me. And so again, then it takes you into that place even more so.
Yeah.
Not only am I not valued, but now I'm in relationships where I'm not even valued enough for a guy to stay with me and not cheat on me.
Right.
And it just continued and continued and continued. So the spiral just kept happening for me. And I met my husband, my ex-husband, in my mid-20s. So I kind of went through all of that until him. And again, I was also, I don't know if you guys, women that are listening or men or whatever, I would go hard quick. So I would meet somebody and I would be in love like in a day or two, and I
Mm-hmm.
like want to spend every moment with them. So I was that girl that was like, smothering them and wanting to spend every moment, because I was just longing for love. I was longing for acceptance. I was longing for somebody to care for me. So I just would fall hard. And
Well, and Michelle, many people do that.
yeah,
And what we don't realize is that there's an inner part of our being as a child that certain needs did not get met.
yeah,
And so when, and it's very young.
yeah,
We talk about this at the prison, and, our primary caregivers are those ones that we rely on to meet those needs.
yeah,
As a child, the only way that we can start to understand our surroundings is in our environment. And
yeah,
in our environment is we're communicating with our environment through facial expressions, through noises, through touch. And if our parents or if maybe not a parent, whoever the caregiver is,
yeah,
if they're not emotionally in tune with themselves, they're not going to be able to give those things that children need at those ages. And
yeah,
so you have a whole generation of people that maybe didn't get that, and now they're out in the world looking for the world to give it to them, and
yep,
they're not finding it, and they're getting in, and they're actually pairing up with people that are actually looking for the same thing.
yeah,
And so it's these crazy dysfunctional relationships that I found myself in
yeah,
as well. And this became, I love my parents. They were financially, they were in my life. I did not have my dad and my mom present in my life, but presence is different than being present.
yes,
And they were both very much going through their own stuff, and emotional needs that I am now aware of now,
yeah,
that I did not get from
yeah,
my parents, and that affected me going on into my adulthood. And as a teenager, I started very young too. I started getting this attention from boys, and then
yep,
found myself in a relationship at the age of 13, and then getting pregnant at that age, actually 17, and
yeah,
having my twin boys at a very young age. And so and as a young mother, how you have kids now, and you don't want to be alone, you know what I
yeah,
mean? And so you don't want to be a single mom. And
right,
so it kept me there for much longer than, but what I needed to figure out, Michelle, was, and I didn't figure that out until decades later. I would tell you it was probably within the last 6 years, and
yeah,
probably less than that.
me too,
Yeah, that I realized why I was in these relationships, why I kept going back to things like this. But one of the things that was really hard for me to do was to forgive myself,
yeah,
and because you said taking responsibility. I had to take responsibility for the treatment that I was allowing myself to accept.
yep, that
And,
is
and I didn't,
100% true,
and I did not understand why.
yeah,
And it goes back to what you said, this whole not feeling worthy.
yeah,
And so maybe this is what I deserve, or maybe this is all I'm going to get.
yeah.
So it's this low hanging fruit, right?
And even if you're in an abusive relationship, the mental part of that too is they make you feel like you're not going to get with anybody else. Like they
Oh,
actually, that's part of the manipulation, is by saying I'm the only person that's going to love you. You're never going to find anybody like me.
100%. Mine
And you're
was
already in a vulnerable place, and then they say that crap. You're like, oh, geez, maybe you're right.
mine was who's going to want you with 2 kids?
Exactly. It's like when you hear that enough, you're like, okay, well, maybe this is what I'm supposed to get,
Yeah. And then when people say, well, why do they stay? Why do you
Yeah.
stay in that relationship? And there was this intense fear that I had. If I wasn't there answering the phone call of when he would call,
Mm-hmm.
and if I had to explain that I went to the store to do this,
Yeah.
there was so much fear behind it.
Yeah. And it's also a control thing because I used to so I went through this in my 30s and we were engaged and everything. It was probably a 6-year relationship. It wasn't all of my 30s,
Mm-hmm.
but it's when I finally got through that relationship, and it was rough. There wasn't a ton of physical violence necessarily. I was also being physical because again, I thought I was this really badass strong woman, and so I would also we would kind of we're not fist fight, but we would kind of hit each other on occasion or slap each other on occasion kind of thing.
Yeah,
Not that often. It was the emotional part for me that was the really damaging part because
yeah,
he just made me feel horrible about myself. I already felt bad about myself, but I allowed his words to make me feel even worse. And
yes,
so that is the part that really got me. And can I also say too that I don't know if other people experience this, but I was really this is gonna be hard to say. The sex was really good, and I never ever had sex like that in my entire life before or after.
mm-hmm.
So there was this passion between the two of us that I'd never experienced and have not experienced since.
Mm-hmm.
That I thought that he was my soulmate. I thought
Yeah,
this is how it's supposed to be. We're both a little, you know, traumatized and both need help or whatever. But it's like this is how I'm supposed to be in it, and we got to figure out how to make this work. And then you put alcohol on top of it, and it makes it even 10 times worse because
mm-hmm.
your brain isn't functioning correctly, normally because you're having some trauma issues. And then you put alcohol in there, and it just totally screws it up even more. So
Yeah,
it was just not. And
yeah,
and there was one incident that was kind of the final one for me where I went back again for I think the third or fourth time or something, and he tried to bite my nose off. He put his mouth around my nose and tried to bite it off, and I got a restraining order. I quit my job because I was too embarrassed to go into work with two black eyes
yeah,
because he didn't break my nose, but he did enough to where I had two black eyes and I was too embarrassed to go back to work, so I just quit my job. Like I stopped working. I got a restraining
and
order.
you talk about explaining the bruises,
Yeah,
right? And so I remember that time, and
yeah,
having to uh, make up stories for those. And then it was and then you talked about alcohol, but someone waking up in the morning and then seeing bruises on you, and they don't remember doing it.
yep,
So that those kinds of things. And one of the things that when I really knew that I needed to step away,
mm,
I'll never forget this. um, it was one of these nights where as a young mom, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, so you're paying
yep,
this bill and this bill's not getting paid and all this kind of stuff. And my phone had gotten turned off, and I was in school at the time. I was actually doing a criminal justice program up at what is it, Red Rocks Community College, and I didn't have a phone. He didn't know that the phone service was shut off, and so I came to my mom's house, and I was sitting here at my mom's doing homework and stuff, and he called, went to a payphone and called and said, "Why have you turned off the phone? Or why aren't you answering the phone?" And I could tell he was drinking, and I said, "Well, I'm not going home tonight because I
yeah,
can tell you've been drinking." And anyways, I'm not going to go into all of that,
yeah,
but
yeah,
when I went home the next morning, um everything in my house, like mirrors, tables, glass tables, and a TV, big boulders had been thrown through them. And I just was like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? I didn't know what to do. And he was passed out. I could smell the alcohol. The only thing I could do was call the police because I
yeah,
didn't know what else to do. I thought,
ah,
if this person can do this, well, what can he do to me? That was like a huge epiphany. And I had
yeah,
already been going through it, but this was like a totally different level of like, oh my gosh, I just didn't even know how to process it. And so I called the police. He knew I called the police, and he immediately took off. And so they came, and this whole thing went on for weeks. And um, you know, I was trying to be subpoenaed to court, all this kind of stuff, and I just still allowed me to be almost in hiding so that I
Yeah.
couldn't get subpoenaed to court,
Yeah.
so that this would never go on his record or he'd ever get charged with it. And I remember the police telling me, calling me on the phone and telling me, if you don't get out of that relationship, one of your family members are going to find you one day. And
Yep.
that was so scary to me, you
Yeah.
know. And that was the beginning of the end, but it still didn't happen right away.
Yeah.
And so
I was going to say too that after I finally made that decision, and again, I made the decision and then I got a restraining order and then we got back together.
Absolutely.
With the restraining order, and then I had to move to Colorado Springs because I didn't want anybody to know that we got back together.
I
So that's
know.
when I moved from Denver to Colorado Springs because I was trying to hide it, and I
Yeah.
was trying to hide it from my family and everybody else. So then I had to go down there, and he came with me, and it was like us escaping. Like we were escaping the people that don't believe in us. It's like, come on, girl. But anyway, so we did that, and so that again, and then somebody found out. I remember my dad calling me very disappointed because he had found out through somebody that David was with me, and not David. That's not his name. Sorry, it's a different person. But I don't know why I said David. That's my ex-boyfriend, and he has nothing to do with this. But anyway, so it's like, then he was like, and then you're like feel even worse because then you're like your dad's disappointed in you, you're disappointed in yourself, all these different things. But and then it was a couple three times later that I finally did it. And let me just say too about law enforcement, at least back then, was not trained effectively on how to handle these kinds of relationships, because a lot of times by the time the cops would show up, this person had already kind of released all their frustration on you and calmed down, and you were at the height of your frustration and anger.
Yes.
Because the police show up and they see this woman or man, whoever,
And they arrest you.
who is in a high level of anger and frustrated, and and then the guy says, see what I have to deal with, and the cop with him. And we used in Colorado Springs, because after I got out of all of this, I started working at Tessa in Colorado Springs, which is a shelter and a hotline for women of domestic violence. After about a year of being with him, I decided to go volunteer there. And then I actually was answering the hotline, talking. I did a lot more research and some training.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very normal for law enforcement. It's not necessarily their fault. They're just not trained effectively.
Right.
So we were spending a lot of time trying to go in and train law enforcement, because unfortunately you get re-victimized that way, because the cops show up and they arrest you, just like you said, Terry.
Well, that's why I'm such a big proponent on trauma-informed care.
Yeah.
And this is one reason why, we must, especially service professionals, which includes law enforcement,
yeah,
and teachers and nurses and anybody who is dealing with people and families, being able to see through a trauma-informed lens and understand what's going on, and understand when we are at a point where we're going to re-victimize someone, and we're re-traumatizing them.
Yeah, 100%.
Because when you have experiences of trauma, you do not, this is for the audience out there, and for me, reminder for me and you, Michelle, that you cannot distinguish, your body and brain cannot distinguish the past from the present.
Yeah.
So it thinks that you are back in that same environment that you were when you were a kid, 2 years old, 6 years old, 17 years old, 21, whatever it be, as a 50-year-old female. It thinks that you're in it again.
Yeah.
And so when someone is when a law enforcement is doing that, it is putting a victim back into that same environment, and it thinks it's happening again.
Yeah.
And so it's very re-traumatizing. And so it's very important that when we're in those professions and in those roles, that we understand that. And as nursing, we take on that we will do no harm.
Yes.
And so that includes re-traumatizing. And so being trauma informed is important.
It so is. And I think too, it was such a good experience for me to be at Tessa. And then I worked in the shelter. I picked up women from the police station in our shelter
Mhm.
van and had to take, route like this to get back to the shelter in case I
Would
was
you
being
have to, yeah,
followed,
so people didn't
and,
know.
and had to like do all those kinds of things. And so, and then I took some classes and stuff like that. And the thing about the abuser or the person that's doing it is it's really a control, it's a really a control and a trauma thing for them as well.
It is.
And I remember this because, I kept trying to say to the person at the time, because he was blaming me for sleeping with everybody and having all these relationships, which was completely untrue. But he assumed that I was having affairs and I was sleeping with someone, and I kept saying, you can't control what I do. If I am going to choose to go out there and sleep with somebody else, you don't have any control over that. You don't have control over that. So you can't spend all of your time worrying about what I'm going to do because you can't control unless you lock me in a room. You can't control him. And I'm not proponent, and I'm not saying you should do that. But I'm just saying it's like
And sometimes they want to.
yeah.
And sometimes their control is just to
They
get
do.
you so that you're
Yeah.
so paralyzed that you
So it's
can't
like
do anything.
they just he could not figure out how to calm his brain down when you didn't do what he wanted you to do.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden it was almost like things firing in his brain going that I'm losing control, I'm losing control, I'm losing control. And he just had to act on it because he didn't. It's almost like anxiety or almost, I don't know what it is exactly. I don't have that brain, but you could almost see it in his eyes that there's there's something going on up here that is not okay,
it's a look of, and now that I'm more trauma informed, I can tell you exactly what that look is, and I didn't know what it was, and it's very frightening.
It is.
But they are completely disconnected from themselves.
Yeah.
And they are in a state of rage, and we talk about the frontal cortex going offline. Theirs is also offline.
Yeah.
And they're not reasoning, they're not thinking of consequences, and they're not thinking of what they're doing,
Yeah.
And so, and then when you, like you said, you mix alcohol or some type of substance with it,
yeah.
It can get very deadly very quick.
It can.
And you said you were also abusive, and I would say I became that way. I became a person that was not authentic to who I am, but it was out of survival, right?
Yeah.
I had to protect myself, and how was I going to do that if I didn't defend myself?
Yes.
And sometimes it was physical.
And it's a good thing we didn't have firearms in the house, because I don't know if one of us wouldn't have killed the other person.
Isn't that scary when we talk about that
just
now?
Even think about. And that's why I know when Terry and I have talked about this in the past about, one decision could have put us in the same position as those women that are in prison that she's helping.
100%.
100% been that person.
Yeah. And I've heard stories of that, and I've been given permission to share some of these, but where they can't find the strength to defend their children because of the trauma, and things happen, and the woman ends up in prison because of not being able to defend her kids.
Yeah.
And so and then the self-blame, the guilt and the shame that one lives with after that.
Yeah.
When something horrible happens, that they can't ever take back.
Yeah. That's the sad part. But I felt as though that working at Tessa not only allowed me to kind of look at, when I was reading about stuff and taking classes and stuff like that, my ex at the time fit 100% textbook into the profile. Yeah. I was like, yep.
I did too. When that first became a reality for me, this was years ago. It was when I was in my criminal justice program.
Mm-hmm.
And I took my psychology class, and I learned about trauma and antisocial personality and all of this stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't just a human that really even has the capacity to realize what they're doing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so
it gives you a little bit of compassion for someone going through that kind of thing as well. And also it changed my perspective of women that are in this situation.
Absolutely.
I stopped, because we were trained when I was at Tessa that if somebody decided to go back to the abuser, we had to respect that decision because
Me
we are
too.
not trying to change them. So we had to
No,
do safety planning with them. We had to give them advice on, okay, so if you're going to do this, we first had to let them know that if you bring your children into that situation, your children might get taken away from you because you're putting them in harm's way.
which is
Yeah,
exactly what women at the prison deal with.
we're
Yes.
mandatory reporters. So if you go into that situation, if you choose to, your kids could be,
Take it
taken away
away.
from you.
Mhm.
So we had to tell them that. But even if they didn't have kids, we just did safety planning. Have your stuff ready to go. Have your
Have a bag packed.
yeah. And
Have a bag packed.
go into a room where there's a window or a door. Don't put yourself in a
Don't
situation.
put yourself in a position to where you can't get out.
Yes, and
You
don't go
know,
in the kitchen where the knives are. For gosh sakes,
right?
take the knives out or whatever. But we had to just safety plan with him, and we had to just let him go. And
You
it
do.
allowed me to separate myself from the shame and the guilt and the blaming of that because I had to just care for them and have compassion for them no matter what decision they made.
Because the thing is
Yeah,
we don't have control of when that
yeah,
awakening is going to happen with them and when
agreed.
enough is going to be enough. And the reality to that is that even us going through it, there was a sense of us feeling like this was, we knew it wasn't normal, but it was our
Yeah,
normal.
yeah,
And so it almost was scary to not, you almost get addicted to those feelings and to the chaos, right? I mean, your body gets so used to it that it wants
yes,
to keep you there because even if it's unsafe, it knows that
yeah.
unsafe,
Even
right?
if it's chaotic and crazy,
Yes.
it's still your comfortable place.
Yes. And I remember even
Yeah,
being in this, there were times where you talked about the makeup time, you know what I mean?
yeah,
That was always
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah,
But then you just knew there was so many cues of predictability and you
yeah,
just knew when it was coming. Like
yep,
and it was like, and it's so crazy now that we've done this so much work within ourselves,
yeah,
why that stuff was continuing to perpetrate and
yep.
why we continue to re-bring those
And
experiences
why it
into our
takes
life.
time and why personal growth is not a destination, it's a
No,
journey.
it's a
Because
journey.
the amount of years that I spent in this headspace of me feeling like unworthy or whatever was a lot of years. So that's not going to just go away overnight. It pops back up and you have to just deal with it when it pops back up and just keep, going back to your
Yes.
strategies that you have. That's
I
the
tell
only thing
that
you can do.
I share that with the women at the prison. I
Yeah.
sit here before you and I am still working on me.
Yep.
And there are still things that come up. And when they come up, and I say that, I say just celebrate the small wins
Yeah.
because there was a time you didn't even know this was not right.
Yeah.
Now there's an awareness that you know that this isn't correct. That
Yes.
there's something wrong with this. So now what do we do? How do we
Yeah.
change? And yes, you're going to go into those thinking patterns once in a while. And you
Yeah.
might a lot in the beginning, but you start to recognize it. And you and I have learned to pay attention to how we feel.
Yeah.
So we talked about that today, talking about the gut, listening to your gut. And the
Oh
more
yeah.
and the more that you start to trust your intuition, you're going to start trusting yourself more. Because
Yeah.
we kind of discount it after we've experienced trauma because then we're like, well, I don't trust myself. I pick bad people,
Yeah.
and then
Oh, I use that one forever. My picker's broke. I
yeah.
used to say my picker's broke all the time.
Yeah, but when you start, and one of the ladies asked me this morning, well, how do we get back from that and start trusting ourselves again? And I said, you begin by starting to find healthier people to be around.
Yeah.
And then you start opening yourself up to healthy people. And
Yeah.
as they start to earn your trust and you start to be able to trust them, then you start to listen to that gut. And then when you start, because we know the red flags, we were very aware of them.
Yeah.
We just didn't listen to them.
Yeah.
Right?
And
Yeah.
it's just starting here. Don't focus on, after I broke up with that guy, I moved because he didn't have a vehicle and I moved up the mountain in Colorado Springs. From
Mhm.
downtown, I moved up the mountain. So I'm like, try to get up here on your bicycle now. You know what I mean? Like he couldn't do it. So, because it was like up the mountain. So I moved away. I made the decision. I moved away so that he couldn't find me at home because he would break into my car and steal stuff out of my vehicle, stuff like that. So I needed to get away from that.
Yeah.
So I did, and I just stayed by myself. I didn't have another boyfriend for probably 7 or 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like the rest of my 30s into my 40s, I was single because I just decided, Michelle, the pattern needs to be broken. It needs to break. You've got to
That's the
break this
season.
pattern.
That's the season I've been in the last 6 years.
Yeah.
You know, I went from this and I swung the pendulum all the way to the right,
Yeah.
and I found and I ended up in a marriage with someone who was always there, present with our family,
Yeah.
and but sometimes a little more passive, I think. And for me, it was safe
Yeah.
because I could control it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I could control it, and then. But I will have to say, at some parts of me became the abuser in that relationship because I was so afraid, and
Yeah.
and he kind of got the brunt of my other relationship. So it was I was equally as destructive in that marriage.
Yeah.
And so, but both of us were both very hurt, and we loved each other very, very much, but didn't know how to love each other correctly, you
Yeah.
know. And so that was a great learning. And so I went from this one to this one, and then I knew, Michelle. Since I was a teenage girl, I've never been by myself. I've
Yeah.
always been in a relationship, and so I knew that this season of my life, Terry needed to heal. And the moment I realize that I don't need anyone is when I'm ready for a relationship.
Yep.
And I feel like I'm at the point right now that I am so comfortable with my relationship with myself,
Yeah.
and with God, of course. But if things happen, they happen. But I am just at peace with who I am, and that's where I needed to get. I needed to not be looking for it from someone outside of myself.
Yeah. And that's the scary part for people that are used to being with somebody, is to be able
Yeah.
to step outside and do that. And I just want to encourage you, if that's something that's going on in your life right now, where you're seeing like a roller coaster ride of relationships and the same kind of thing over and over again. There is some power in being able to just say, you know what, I'm just going to focus on myself right now. I'm just going to focus on myself and my personal development and healing. Or you can find a support system around you that will help you through that process instead of having to try to seek that out through a partner. You can absolutely do that. And there can be some tremendous growth when you do that, because you're
Yes.
not focusing all of your, and then once you're not focusing all your energy on this other things, other the partnership. And then once you've had some growth, then it changes your perspective on who you
Well,
want
and
to be around.
it changes who you would even be
Yes.
interested in.
Yes.
Like now I look back and I'm like, holy freaking cow. Like I'm like, what in the world? Like the things
Yeah.
that I'm even attracted to or like even want in my life are
Yeah.
completely different than
Yeah.
before. And so and I had to get really clear on what I wanted. And but you know what? This is when I say, going back to when I say, I don't want trauma. I would never encourage someone to go through trauma to experience
Growth.
teaching,
Yeah.
but it happened in my life and I allowed it to teach me. And so now I realize what it is Terry wants.
Yeah.
And I had to see the bad to realize what I didn't want to now. So now I know what I want because I've seen what I don't want.
It's
Right.
also really uncomfortable, Terry, because there's still that thought process, even with me, that certain men are not going to like me
Yeah.
because I'm not I'm not. I'll never forget this. I was in therapy years ago, and I was telling the therapist this exact thing. I said, well, yeah, but this kind of guy that's real successful and whatever it was, I had a picture of my mind of what the ideal guy was or whatever. And I go, they don't choose girls like me. And they go, well, and she said, well, who do they choose? And then I had to try to come up with the words of who they choose. Can I tell you how hard that was? Because I was like,
Because you were making stories up in your
yeah,
mind.
I was like, they choose skinny women
You
that
were
are
making those stories up in your
blonde and they're real successful or whatever. I mean, I was making it, and then it's like, and then it was like I could see my actual thought process come into words, and I felt like an idiot even saying
I
it.
was just going to say that. This is why, to our audience, it is so important to get a
Yes.
coach, to get a mentor, to get a therapist, to get somebody in your corner because when you can talk through those, or you have
Yeah.
someone who asks you powerful questions
Yeah.
and you listen to yourself, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe I'm saying this.
I know. I feel
But
like
in
it's
our
a huge
head,
thing.
it's so logical.
Yeah. I have yeah, it's very interesting to me how that all works out, but it's like I think it's worth it. I think we're all deserving of it, and I think it's worth it to have those conversations. And I still feel that way a little bit, to be honest. I
Yeah.
still feel like that I'm not the kind of person that a certain person would choose, but that's not it doesn't the right person for
It's
me
the right person
will,
for you.
will choose me no matter
Yes.
what. You know what I mean? Like that's the way it works.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
And I say this a lot, is sometimes we're choosing ourselves. We're waiting on us to choose ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to choose us before anyone else is going to choose us.
Yeah.
And choosing us is knowing our worth. And the day that I realized, oh, you're waiting for you, Terry. I was describing who it was I wanted, like
Yeah.
values and stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so we bring into our life people who are just like us.
Yeah.
And it's why we see beautiful things in people, right?
Yeah.
And so stay curious. I love saying that, is just stay curious, because your journey says our journeys tell us so much about ourselves and what it is we want in our life. And we can have it all.
Yeah.
And it starts at home with us.
Yep. 100%. I think this, is there anything else, any final thoughts you have on that?
I would love to say, choose you. When we're waiting for someone to come into our life, we're waiting on us. And so I'm going to just reiterate that.
Yeah.
Keep choosing yourself over and over and over again. And when you choose you and you learn how to be kind to you and show grace to yourself, you actually show others how to treat you. And when you know what you want and you respect yourself, I'm telling you, God, the universe, whatever it is you relate to, it's gonna give it back to you, because it wants to. It wants to give you everything that you want and give you your heart's desire. We just don't realize what we want sometimes when we've gone through it.
And if you've grown up in an environment where, those kinds of things were always what you were watching, what you were looking at around, like maybe I'm just guessing. I don't know if this is true, Terry. You can talk on it. But if you grow up when you're in that environment where everything around you is chaos and everything around you is this type of, relationships that are like that or whatever, like now it could be time for you to step outside of that and find a different support system.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, is for you to make that decision to say, you know what? I want something different in my life, and I'm going to, because you could say, I don't have any other choices. These are the choices I have. This is the environment that I live in. I don't have the money to go somewhere else. I don't have the ability to go somewhere else. There is a way that you could find a support system, though, of people who are going through similar things, that you could start having a network of people that care about you, that want you to do well.
Yes.
And even though you may still be living in, around an environment where these things are happening, you can direct your energy to the people in that community that really want to help you.
Yes.
They are there. They are there. You just have to find those folks.
And they're actually so close to you that you don't even realize.
Yeah.
When we start to open ourselves up and start releasing the energy that in that survival energy, right? Yeah. Control, and just I'm protecting myself, and that dissociating, not being able to be present. When we're able to be present, more grounded and more focused, and we're more clear, we can actually see other people coming into our life, and there are people there that are that have probably been trying to, that oftentimes were throwing me a lifeboat, and I just wasn't
paying attention.
Yeah.
It shouldn't matter what kind of socioeconomic class you're in. It shouldn't matter how much money you have. It shouldn't matter what the color of your skin is. It shouldn't matter if you're male or female, any of those things. So I as I never want to sit here, and I'm just going to say this because this is something I think about. I never want to sit here as a white woman saying you guys should go do this when I
No.
am very much aware of the fact that there is white privilege and I have it. So I don't ever want to feel like I'm trying to talk down to people or that, well, this worked for me, it should work for you. I still find myself in situations where I don't know the right words, but I definitely had some moments where I was in so around people and communities that were kind of the bottom of the bottom.
Yeah.
And so I found myself in those situations as well. And I was hanging out there. And so it's like, again, I could have easily found myself in prison. I don't want anybody to think that I'm over here like trying to put myself up above anybody, because I could have been in prison easily.
Part of my story is I swear to you that the Lord put me into that prison to show me as a reminder of what he kept me from.
Yeah.
I truly believe that.
Yeah.
Because I was not in a right headspace. I was not with the right people. I was doing stupid things.
Yeah.
And so I just thank God so many times for the things he kept me from, that I was not making good decisions in my life.
Yeah.
Start with, drinking and getting a DUI when I was in my early 20s,
Yeah, me too. I did the same thing.
Yeah. And doing some crazy things that now I look back and I'm like, oh my God.
And we were lucky that at the time, getting a DUI today is way worse than it was.
Way worse
than when we were in our 20s. You know what I'm saying?
Way worse. Oh yeah.
So it's like it's a scary thing, and it should be a scary thing because it's.
Well, and you get a DUI, and I'll tell you what, man. When I had to go sit in that Mothers Against Drunk Driver meeting,
yeah.
OMG,
right?
I was like, how could I have ever gotten behind a car?
Yeah.
And put myself in that, or put myself or anybody else in that situation.
Right. Exactly.
So it was like putting the fear of God in you, to not ever do that again. You know what I mean? And so yeah, it's way different now.
I hope that, I hope that, maybe there's this little tidbit that we talked about today that resonates with you, or somebody, that you could just share the whole podcast. If you don't want to make it weird and share just this episode, you could share the podcast with them, and maybe they'll find this one. Or if you're that person who's kind of in this or has been in this, we would love to see your comment or, engage with the podcast itself. We'd love to have a conversation with you. So we hope that you, like I said, got something out of this today.
I want to say one more thing.
Yeah, please.
You're not alone.
No.
You must reach out. You can't silently cry because nobody's going to hear it.
Yeah.
And you're worth it. And so
absolutely.
You're strong enough to get out of this. And whatever you're going through today, it's not your forever. It doesn't have to be. And so I just want you to hear that from me, because I know listening to this and looking at us, you can think, well, how can I ever get out? Because I was there, and things felt impossible. And can I just tell you, they are possible. They are so possible.
100%. Thanks so much, everyone. We appreciate you. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for listening.
Always coming back.
Yes. We will talk to you soon. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
Bye.